name's Lindy Cowling and welcome to my channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk. My email is info@lindycowling.co.uk. And the title of today's video is Carriers of the Flame. Anyone who has watched my videos before will know that this is an experiential humanitarian channel. When I say experiential, that is through my own living experience, my own living embodiment, and or working with a multitude of clients over the last 16 years that have experienced some of what I'm talking about, but almost all of what I share is through my own personal experience. In fact, I would say all of what I share is through my own personal experience, either through working it through with clients or as direct experience with me. So the reason I've called this video today Carriers of the Flame is to just briefly explain from my perspective why there is a commonplace phenomena that takes place in spiritual connections. These spiritual connections would be old school, what I call the old school, the old formation of twin flame union template, mainly that kind of spiritual energy dynamic. But this play out does happen in other connections as well. So I'm mainly using twin flame union dynamic through the direct experience and through the people I work with across the world that have genuinely been activated through that dynamic. But it does happen in other connections as well. Catalyst connections, it happens. Soul connections, it can happen. Soulmate connections, it can happen. So, Carriers of the Flame, the reason I've called the video this is because there is a phenomena that happens with all of those connections, and that phenomena is, it appears, and that pattern hasn't changed, it appears that in approximately 90 to 95% of all cases, let's call them cases, one of the party involved, so if there's two involved, one of the party involved continues to evolve in a state of consciousness, the ladder of consciousness, and effectively carry the representation of the twin flame union within them, and the other party across the world, we see the same thing, and this has most definitely happened in my dynamic, it happened as well. And the other party remains at a different level of expression, at a more linear level of expression, and doesn't carry the representation for the whole soul. Let me break this down so that you understand that I'm not coming from a place of judgment or a place than, better than, less than. I've explained this consistently from the level of consciousness that I was able to articulate it for the last 2.5 years on YouTube. And some of the early representations of this theme would be, I'll take the high road, you take the low road, for example, that video. I've threaded it through, I think I did bring it in again in 2 or 3 videos. I can't remember them all now because I've done quite a few videos over the years. One of the most recent ones I threaded the theme in again was, can a twin flame union collapse? And then I said there that often place we see one of the pair in the timeline carrying on into that state of consciousness and opening up, and often the other one not going that way. And it's a pattern I've seen repeatedly across the world. I've most definitely 100% experienced that dynamic myself, and that's definitely what happened with me. And I have gone on to embrace and go into the heart and into that state of consciousness, whilst the other party stay down. And when I say stay down, there's no judgment in that, but I'll explain from the perspective of the soul, my own personal case, but what I see across the world. This is what I've seen multiple times across the world. Now, before I go any further, before I launch into that, it's important for me to say that there are one or two exceptions to that, where both carry the flame, the inner fire, the inner spiritual fire, and do go forward in consciousness, and both express, but away from each other physically. Is that commonplace, and have I hardly ever seen it? I've only seen it once out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions with people from all over the place, all over the world, all different dynamics. I've heard it said before by one or two other people that they have seen occasionally, even they say not very often, where you'll have, for example, let's use twin flame, old school twin flame union, that representation of consciousness, the original template. That's why I call it old school. Not that it's old hat, but that I come from old school too. That it's the original template, of that original expression of consciousness, not the new form of that energy. I've heard it said that once or twice also they have seen where twin flames, for example, are both at a state of consciousness where they're racking up into that elevated state of consciousness, what I call the 12D state of consciousness. They're expanding, they're both at level pegging, shall we say, but both maybe hundreds of miles apart, thousands of miles apart, or not actually very far apart at all, but not in communication, not around each other. Can that happen? Yes. Does it happen? I've seen it in one case, and I've heard it said that other people have seen it very, very rarely or occasionally, so we know it can happen. Is that the general rule of thumb? The general rule of thumb? I would say not the general rule of thumb, and I'm going to explain why. And it's not because of a belief system that I'm going to take the spin on it this way. I know from working a genuine twin flame union template, standing up in front of roomfuls of people with a twin flame, doing healing, doing channeling, doing demonstrations, working that energy for 3.5 years, that in its purity, the combined dynamic, the combined energy of the expression of the soul within two human forms alongside each other can be amazing and can be phenomenal. When both are in sync, on track, no contaminants, no disruptors, not being ruled by the head or the ego, not distorted, not starting to distort, not with narcissism or psychopathic things ruling the roost. When it's in its purity, when it's on form, when it's on track, it's off the charts. That dynamic is extraordinary, and I know that genuine twin flames, when they're in tandem with one another like that, when their energy is, they've both taken the high road, not only is it phenomenal, but they are actually, in most cases, they can do better working around each other like this, working this way, than they do away from each other. Are there exceptions to this? Yes, most definitely. But I'm going to have to call it as I've experienced it and call it as I see it. And in an ideal world, I've said many times on camera, I think it would be fantastic to see all genuine expressions of that around each other and working that energy. But it doesn't often happen that way because of all the multiple reasons that I've discussed on camera and others I've discussed on camera too, of why it doesn't always morph that way and end up that way. What I will say is, like I say, there are exceptions to that are able to work that energy, that keep level pegging with each other and are around each other, or there are exceptions that can work that energy, that are away from each other, that have kept pace with one another. But I see that, I've seen that in my work and experienced that. Personally, I haven't experienced it that way. I've gone on and carried it for the soul, really. That's what I see across the world, except for one or two exceptions. Now, a little bit of a controversial thing to say, and I'm not the only one to have said this. I feel very rarely, sometimes, you know, the soul decides actually, before you even activate, shall we say, it's going to be this particular individual that carries it forward, really, carries it forward for the soul. And the other one will activate them, stay around them so long, and then they'll drop down again, drop back. Now, let me clarify before I get a lot of rhetoric about that, oh, that means they're less than, and you're judging. No, I'm not. I'm talking in states of consciousness and dimension. And I can say, having experienced it and seen it across the world, when both twins are working dimensionally at the same time, they're like magnets. They find it impossible to stay away from each other, because it's off the charts in that magical love, divine love, the chemical pull to one another on every single conceivable front, because spiritual energy is running the show. And that's why I say it's very unusual to have two at the same level that have both elevated into that expanded level of consciousness, even able to stay away from each other, because it is such unprecedented on all fronts how amazing, magical, and the divine orchestrates it so you're around each other, you know, dancing that again, working it in this act of service. And that's why it's highly unusual, and I virtually never come across it, and I know it's very rare to see them actually choose as a soul to be away from each other in that way. Usually how it plays out is one carries the flame for the soul. You know, if that parting sometimes the parting is part of the natural process and the evolution, but if it's gone one step further, where the parting, there will be no resolution to that parting. Both have been activated, and both haven't taken the decision to take the high road, to take their greatest expression, to be what they came here to be their true authentic selves. If for whatever reason, a myriad of reasons, which I could talk all day about, why one aspect of soul consciousness in human form out of the two together in that dynamic has not chosen that route, then 99.9% of the time the other one goes forward. And I see it all across the world. The other one goes forward. They do the templating. They go on to do other templating. They go on in the act of service. They evolve and continue to go up in the 12D blueprint ladder of consciousness at a minimal 5-dimensional baseline. They're the ones that carry the flame. And the other party either continues the same pattern on the same trajectory, or they go a little bit further and they can seem to get no further, because, to be quite blunt, they have not chosen themselves. They have not chosen their own divinity, their own authenticity, and they have decided on a soul level to continue round a more linear trajectory. I am not judging on this. I am stating how it seems to play out, how it 100% played out for me, and how it seems to play out across the world. Usually when the two aren't around each other because they're not at similar paces of evolution, where they've got stuck in their ego, or stuck because of some other reason, or, you know, like I say, I could talk all day on that. There's lots of reasons why there's a stumbling at the 11th hour there. Then one of them one of the pair seems to be the one that goes forward and does what, you know, they're kind of driven, you know, and they completely expand to the heart. The other one kind of, I could say in some ways does the best they can, but they tend to follow more of a, even if they don't follow a conventional route and are even working in so-called light worker industries themselves, they don't ever get to where they did have the potential to get, because they didn't, internally, they weren't able to choose truth, or they weren't able to choose authenticity, or they weren't able to choose the soul. Really interesting how that's just really affected my throat chakra, because obviously, oh, that did affect my throat chakra. Obviously that affected me directly too, and my own primary connection also was not able to choose or the authenticity, and actually didn't choose themselves at all, and subsequently didn't choose me, who's also expression of the soul. That is something over the years now I am, you know, obviously 100% cool with and come to terms with, and have gone on, you know, and expanded into other things. I think it was really worth bringing this out today because, like I say, it's a pattern that I've seen repeatedly all over the world, playing out over and over and over again. And people, predominantly, not always, there's a small percentage of males that have gone forward and carried the flame. There are some that have gone forward and carried it. The bulk of that have gone forward are female, probably about 80% female, that have carried it, and that have decided to elevate up. Obviously there are exceptions to all of this. It's not a hard and fast kind of rule. But it's definitely worth saying. I don't think I've ever brought a video out where I've just focused entirely on that, you know, entirely on that perspective, and explained it kind of in detail. So obviously for the person that carries the flame, I mean, we can go into a whole different ballpark again here and say the person that decides to go forward and carry the flame, obviously they have different options within that arena. Again, like I've said on videos, especially the last sort of half a dozen videos really, they have options there where they, because they're continuing up in their evolutionary consciousness, are able to interact with others at compatible evolutionary consciousness. As you know, once you start on that fast track to consciousness, you know, things don't stay static for long, they move very, very quickly. So once they are carrying the flame, these are people that are totally mission orientated, humanitarian orientated. They're all about the heart, all about truth, authenticity. It's actually, it's not concepts that they have, it's who they are. Compassion oozes from them, authenticity oozes from them, truth oozes from them, love oozes from them. It is not something, they are the embodiment of it, so they don't aspire to it, they are it. And therefore they're not just carrying that spiritual fire, they are that spiritual fire. They are the embodiment of that spiritual fire. A spiritual fire that is within all of us, you know, whether we are triggered, activated, or part of twin flame union, whether we are soulmates, catalysts, it doesn't really matter what names we put on any of it. All of us have that spiritual fire within us. Not everybody chooses to act upon it, not everybody even gets the opportunity to act upon it. You know, and people will go to different stages in their consciousness and evolution according to the dictates of their own spirit and the dictates of their own soul. So, you know, just to finish here, when I say carriers of the flame, they're not propping the other flame up and carrying them like a parasite. That's a whole different video and a whole different ball game. I'm talking about carrying the spiritual fire, carrying the spirit and soul within, and moving forward as the embodiment in whatever capacity they move forward as in life. People say, you know, does my mission have to be this? Does it have to be that? Well, when you're the embodiment of spiritual fire, you are what it says on the tin. You are the mission, because you're putting out a frequency. You're it. You're the authentic you. You're your greatest version. You're your higher self in embodiment. That is it. You know, sometimes you don't have to go out and be doing things. You are doing it by being it. Whether you're cleaning the restroom or serving tables, waiting tables in a bar, or sweeping the streets, or whether you're, you know, a mum, you're a housewife, you know, where you're a cook, or whether you're out on, you know, on the world stage, or whether you're a pop star, or a singer, or a movie star, or whatever. Whether you're in the light worker industry, you know, or spiritual industry, and actually only a small percentage are. Let's make that point as well. There's not many of the authentic ones in that industry, actually. Again, that's been a bit of a shock over the years. You know, they're across all walks of life, because we as humans are across all walks of life. We all have that potential within us, and sometimes we are blessed to be activated, you know, in one way or another. But it's up to us whether to make that conscious decision and soul decision, whether to be carriers of that flame, or whether to try and diminish it and extinguish it, for all the reasons that are not for our highest outcome. On that note, I will love you and leave you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for resonating. And till we meet again.